Okay, hello, I'm Michael. I work as a backend developer at STRV, and I'm here to tell you something about the API design. Okay, let's start. At the beginning, there is one disclaimer that there is no ultimate general solution for an API. So this session will be more about some guidelines and good principles of an API. Because as you may already know, every API is and will be unique. So please don't kill me for everything. Okay, so let's move. Contents of the session. So first, there will be general guidelines and principles of the good API. The second chapter will be about the examples. It will be really basic examples, how to build an URLs, how to use namings, what should the response looks like. So it will be nothing advanced. And then question and answers. So the first one, general guidelines and principles. First, I want to mention some of the most important properties of a good API. They are not ordered by the most important, so don't take it this. So it's the API should be semantic. It should be also consistent, flexible, secure, and it also needs to have a documentation. We will talk about more every one of these. So let's start with the semantic API. It means that the API should be self-descriptive. This means keep it simple. Don't reinvent anything, and don't do any fancy stuff which you don't need in API design. There are a lot of standards how to do an API, and it's good to follow them. They are here for a reason, and also every developer, which is your potential consumer of your API, knows the standard. So it will be very easy to work with your API. He will understand it much faster. And just keep in mind that people don't want to learn your custom technologies. They just want to use your API. So that's why you should follow the standards when you are doing the API. And also the URL naming should be also self-descriptive. So it's good to follow some conventions. So it will be again easier for the people understand your API and use it. This may be more important than you think, and of course it may cause a lot of problems and even more than you can think. Okay, consistency. So API should be also consistent. So again, about the URL naming, keep it consistent. For example, is a standard in REST that you are using plurals names. So for example, /users. And it's good to use the same thing everywhere in your API. So once you will decide to use plurals, for example users, then use users everywhere, not combine user and users. Or for example person and somewhere will be user. This will be very confusing. So keep the names consistent. Also keep the requests and response consistent. So for example, if you will decide that every error response will send an attribute message, then call it message everywhere. Don't combine that one response will return error message and second will return just message. It will be again confusing and much harder to use for the API consumer. Also keep the consistency in methods. If you decide to use put for an update, which is also standard, use it everywhere for update. Don't combine that one update will be post, one will be put. It may be against confusing. And if your API will be consistent, it will allow the users to understand your API, not just use it. So once they will understand it, they will be able to use it maybe without reading a long documentation, because it will be, as I said, self-descriptive and consistent. And also when you are doing a bigger project or you expect that your project will change a lot, then consider versioning and include the versions in prefix of your URL. So for example, like this. This will like allow you to do new releases of your API very easily. You don't need to force the users to switch, and also all the users will know that they are using now the version 1. Okay, next thing is a flexibility. Important question here is if you know who is a consumer of your API. If it will be your colleague or yourself, or if you are building a solution for like everyone on the planet, so some public API. If you don't know who is your consumer, or it may be an everyone, it's good to do it as flexible as it may be. So for example, support multiple request and response formats. You don't know, for example, if your consumers will use an JSON or XML, so you can support multiple of them. They can tell you, for example, in header, like in accept the header, for example, application JSON, or you can provide them possibility to tell you in a parameter of any URL, like I want to JSON, or like this, for example. The other thing, like don't be case sensitive. I saw this sometimes, and it's not good for like in examples like this. If you want to give the user possibility to choose the order or something, don't differentiate between these two, because it will be confusing. User may not consider this even in documentation as important, and it will be returning him errors, so this is a really bad practice. But of course, in some things you need to be case sensitive, but these general things I don't recommend it. Okay, and against versioning. If you will use versioning in a URL, your API will be very flexible, because you will be able to switch to another version without like forcing your users to switch on the new version too. So you can support multiple of them. So this is really good. Another thing, security. Against the golden rule, don't reinvent anything. There are a lot of standards for an authorization, so for example sessions, tokens, or OAuth 2 and this kind of stuff, so don't reinvent anything. I had a really bad experience with one API. The guys did some very custom authorization. It took me like 1 week to make it work, and until today I don't have an idea how I did it, but it was probably not safe, because they forced me to like store the user password in my database in unhashed manner. So yeah, don't reinvent anything. There are standards for this. Most systems will use and require the user roles, so it's good to use them in your API. The other thing which I don't recommend is to use tokens without the expiration for the end users. In this way you can easily lose traction, like who has access to your system. So I also recommend to like put an expiration to every token which you generate for the access. Another thing, validate and centralize all inputs. So for example, basic validation, this is more important in Node, like if the input is a really integer, if you are expecting integer, because you know the Node is not strict, and in other languages this will be done by your language automatically. And what is important is to do the centralization also for the SQL or JS injection. Also there is cross-site request forgery. You need to think of that. There is a lot of ways how to prevent it. And also never forget to validate access to the requested resource. Also, for example, if I am asking for something like this, that users/user ID/document/document ID, we need to validate if the document really belongs to the user, like who is presented in the URL. It's kind of a logic thing, but I saw a lot of times that people was not doing it. Okay, another thing, documentation. I think, and I can say that we think in STRV that every argument why not to do a documentation is a wrong argument. The documentation is really important because it makes it easy or even possible to use your API. And this makes it possible not only for your colleagues or for different people, but even for you, because you may and probably will forget about your own API. for example, I did multiple APIs and I forgot all of them. I even forgot maybe half of the current project's API. So yeah, it's even good for you. Yes, and when you are writing documentation, be short but descriptive, and it's good to keep a structure of the documentation. I put here some things which you don't have to forget when you are doing the documentation. So it's of course the URL name of the endpoint, authorization or the role which is required for this endpoint, of course inputs if they are required, what is their type, what is their length, for example what are the allowed values for then a method, if it's put, post, and also description of logic, and this needs to be short and descriptive because no one wants to read like big pile of text. And also responses, which kind of responses they may expect, like which errors and what should be on the success. Okay, and of course you can put there anything what you consider as important. Okay, documentation. Documentation is so important that I gave it one more slide. Actually, I give it 2 more slides, but I didn't update, and now I look unprofessional. But yeah, this same will happen if you will not keep your documentation up to date. So it's really important. It may even cause more mess than don't have a documentation. And this is a really hard thing to do and it's of course not a very good thing. But you can prevent this, for example, by auto-generating the documentation from a code. There is multiple tools which do this for all the languages, so just Google it and you will find something. And I also prepared one showcase of an interactive documentation because I think it may be even more powerful, and I really liked one of the pipe drives. By the way, Pipedrive is a CRM, so I want to just quickly show you. Here it is. It's on the web as a HTML site. Here is some boring stuff, probably important. But here you put your own API token. I don't have any, so just random. And here is a list of all endpoints. They are ordered by an object. Also, for example, deal activities and stuff. And every endpoint is listed here. It's colored by the method, and if you will click on some of them, you will see all the properties and if they are optional or required. You can, for example, put there some value and click try it, and it will execute the request, show you what was the call, how the response headers looks like, and how the response body looks like. So this is very powerful documentation, and it was a really pleasure to work with this API for me. But it must take a lot of time to the creators of it. So okay, that was it. And of course, to motivate you to do the documentation, if you will write the documentation, there is a significantly smaller chance that you will be called an idiot by people you never met, and this is really a true thing. Okay, let's move on to examples. There will be just really simple ones. But at the beginning, history of the REST API. I don't like the history stuff, but this is really exciting, or maybe just for me, but we will see. It was defined in 2000 by Roy Fielding, and it is probably the most used API standard today. And what is really interesting, that it was his dissertation work on a university. So it's really inspiring for me that he was doing something for school just to graduate, and he created the most used standard for the whole world. So yeah, this is interesting for me. Okay, let's move on to examples. First will be the URLs for the get method. Get method is used for the get data. This is surprise. Okay, if you want to ask for the list of users, we can ask like this, and also we can include the parameters in the URL in case of get. So like this will return me all users which has a name Michael. If I want to ask for a specific user, I can do it like this, like user/user ID. If I want to have cars of some user, I can do it this way. The first example is just basic parameter for filtering, and the second one, I am not sure if it's part of the standard or not, but I saw it a lot of time. I even use it, that if, for example, car has some really strong parameter, even that strong that, for example, you will never ask for cars in general, but only with some like specific type, you can include it in the URL. But as I say, I don't know if it's like correct way or not, but I was using it and I saw it too. And of course you can ask for cars directly if it's allowed in your application, for example, just to get all of the cars without specific user, like this. Then here is a post. Post is used for creating a new records and rarely used for the updates. It's allowed in the standard, and I think it's because of the historical purposes that old browsers doesn't support using put in forms. So I think it's because of this, but I'm not sure. So it's used mostly for the create. Data should be in body, and it looks like this. If I want to create user, I will do it like this. If I want to create a car for some specific user, I will do it like this. So I will create card which will be binded to the user, which is specified in URL. Or I can do it like directly create card without specifying the user. Of course, if your application logic allows this. Then put. Put is used for updates. There is also a patch which should be used for partial updates. So if you are updating the whole object, it should be put. Otherwise it should be patch, but I see a lot of times using put just for everything, and I even use put for everything. I'm not using patch. So I think this is not a problem, and it's not also restricted by a standard. Data should be in body, and the URLs looks like this, like users, user ID. You are updating the user with this ID. Same for the cars, and same for the cars again, but here you specify the user, so you are updating the car for this specific user. If this car don't belong to the user, you just don't update it because it's wrong. And every time you need to specify which ID are you updating in the URL according to the REST standard. Okay. Then delete. Delete is again surprise. It's used for deletes. And it should the URLs looks like the ones for the put. So you need to every time like include the ID of what you are trying to delete. So for example, this. Of course, you need to validate if the car really belongs to the user. Otherwise, you will not delete it because it's not true what is there. Or you can delete car directly, or you can delete also user. I miss it. Never mind. It's same like the car. Okay. Then I want to tell you about one thing. I call it not found issue. This may seem like a really basic thing and logical thing, but again, I saw a lot of times that people didn't understand it. Not the first two examples, but the last one, you will see. Okay, so if I ask for the users like this, and the server didn't find any user, we will return an empty array, not an 404. If we will ask for one specific user and we will not find him, we will return an 404 not found instead of like empty object or something like this. But the last thing, which is a little bit a catch, it's if we are asking for all the cars of some specific user. If we will not find a cars for this user, we will return an empty array, but if we will not found the user itself, we will return a 404 not found in this case. So as I said, I see a lot of times that, for example, cars was not found and it returns 404 too, or in all cases it returns empty array. So this is how you should differentiate between what is not found. And Yeah, I think that's it. I can even mention one thing which is not on the slide, because a lot of people was asking me for this after a presentation in Brno. For example, it's a good practice if you are looking for some resource and you find out that the resource don't belong to the user which is authorized. And in this case, it's not good to return 401 unauthorized, but 404, so not found. And if you will try, even GitHub is using it. If you will copy the URL of some repository, log out, and then try the URL, you will get 404. This is because of the security reasons, that you don't want to tell someone that, hey, this resource exists, but you don't have an access. You will rather tell them like, this not exist. And yeah, that's everything. If you will have some questions, I will like to answer them.
Do you see any alternatives for REST APIs?
Yes, there are, but I didn't use them, to be honest.
Have you heard about GraphQL?
Yes, I heard, but I didn't try it. I think it may be very interesting for some use cases.
Yeah.
So, for example, for applications with a really strong front-end part. Yep.
What do you use for documentation generation?
I used an auto-generated tool. It's called, I think, API.js now, but I used also API before. But I think the API is like too complex, and if you don't need a really like perfect documentation, it's better to use like something auto-generated. It depends on the project. Okay, good then. If you will have any questions later, I will be here for a while, so you can ask me. Thank you for your attention and have a good rest of the day.